welcome back to your DIY Gamer Lessons. In the last class we were able to create a score. This is very important. We're going to use that score to make it more difficult now. We actually tried to make it more difficult in the last lesson, but realized that in fact it took so long to get score right that we're going to do a whole new lesson just based on making it more difficult. So how do we make it more difficult? Well, one of the obvious ways is we now have a way to score this thing. We know that we're recording score and we're displaying it to ourselves. But the other thing is we have a delay between each of the frames of the game. So the wall moves towards you at a certain speed. You can move your ship at a certain speed. What happens if that speeds up? Suddenly things get much more complicated. So what we're going to do is we're going to just remind ourselves what we have to do. The most important thing is make it more difficult to play by speeding things up. Boom. So what we've been doing in the last few lessons is we review our code to make sure it seems quite clean. And currently it still looks fairly clean, clears the game. We check the whole game over thing. If it is game over, then it does that. If it's not game over, then you just carry on with the walls. Check for collisions, switches. All of this is quite organized. Now look at this guy, the delay 300 milliseconds. I'm going to change that delay 300 milliseconds and call that delay difficulty, right? So that's a new variable that I have to create because I just made that up. Int difficulty equals 300, because that's what we're starting with to begin with, right? 300 milliseconds between each frame. That's quite slow. Now let's think about it this way. You know how do we know when to increase the difficulty, make it harder? Well, you see how on our score here, we're busy scoring it based on every single time we get to the next level, the next wall, we get a point. Why don't we use the number of rows, the height of the row, as the difficulty? So the first one will be difficulty level 1, then the next row will be level 2, 3, 4. So as soon as our score gets to 8, as soon as it hits the 9th one, we know that we're on to the next level of difficulty. That makes sense? So the way we handle that is wherever we're incrementing our score, where were we incrementing our score? Does anybody remember? I believe it happened down with the walls. Here it is, score is equal to score plus 1. So what we do is we say at this stage, if our score, now we're using this very interesting thing called modulo. Modulo, which comes up as percentage sign, 8 is equal to 0. Now, if you don't believe me what a modulo does, what it basically says is whatever the score value is divided by 8, the remainder is what the modulo is, right? So you say, if my score is 5 and you go 5 modulo 8, what's the remainder if you go 5 divided by 8? It's 5 actually, because that's what's left over. There's no answer on the left-hand side of that. There's just it's 0 and the remainder is 5. Because of course 5 doesn't divide into 8 properly. If 8 divides into 8, what is the remainder? The answer of 8 divided by 8 is equal to 1 with no remainder. So the answer there would be 0. So as soon as we hit 8, we know that we're getting a modulo value of 0, a remainder value of 0, which means that we can increment to the next level. And what we do there, to be absolutely sure that I'm not telling you things that are not true, I'm going to look in the reference. There it is. There's the modulo. Click on that. Calculates the remainder when one integer is divided by another. That's exactly what I said to you. Useful for keeping a variable within a particular range. So it also forces things to never go outside of that range. Okay, perfect. So here we have if score percentage 8 modulo 8 is equal to 0. So we've managed to fill up 8 points. Then what happens? We're going to say our difficulty, which is our time in between frames, is we should subtract minus equal to 30, right? Which is the same as saying difficulty is equal to difficulty minus 30. Make sense? I hope so. Now this is interesting. We're using this difficulty variable. Remember, whenever we reset our game, we have to make sure that we're also resetting our variables back to where they should be. So I'm just going to reset that to 300 when we've pushed the start button after the game is over. So let's see what happens. Oopsie daisy. Difficulty, did I spell that wrong? I did. Doesn't understand what I just wrote because I didn't spell it right. Upload, let's see what happens. So, let's push start. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Ooh, I think it's getting faster. Oh, it's never. Oh, look at that. That worked. I got to the 17th point. But you saw, A, it was getting faster, and B, there's actually a little bug because there was no way I could have gotten past that. So this is really great news. We've actually managed to do exactly what we were hoping to. We've made the difficulty harder, given ourselves a point system that we can stick to, so we can actually give ourselves some feedback on the points visually. We know how to restart the game. We've basically got a fully functional game now. The only thing that we have to do now is do some housekeeping. And so what we'll do in the next lesson is review what we've made, figure out what little bugs there might be, like the one we just discovered, and try and fix those things to make it super robust and amazingly playable. Thank you very much. Join me next time.